Welcome back. Today I'm looking at a game sent to me by one of my subscribers named Peter Sonde, I believe, of the United States. And he said this is the rapid game that put him over 900 for the first time. So congratulations to Peter. He says he's trying to reach 1200 before the end of this year. I think that's completely achievable with 4.5 months left. It's going to take some work and it's going to be difficult, but I think you can do it. Especially since he started as 450 rapid back in April or March and is now up to 916. So let's take a look at this game and see what happens. Okay, Peter opens with e4, and already I'm unfamiliar with the position from White's perspective because I just so rarely play e4. Maybe someday I will switch to it and I will understand some of those openings. But I do understand the opponent's response, which is c6. I play the Caro-Kann and I'm trying to learn it. I say I'm studying it, but I'm sure higher level players would call what I'm doing learning the first few moves rather than studying. Regardless, Peter plays the next best move, which is d4, and his opponent plays d5. This is the first two moves for each player of the Caro-Kann in almost every situation, with a few exceptions. Now here, what I normally face when I'm playing with the black pieces is either the exchange variation or the advanced variation. Those seem to be the most common at my level. Either White pushes their e-pawn forward, guarded by this pawn, and then starts cramping Black's position, which I find that sometimes pretty tough to get out of. Or White takes here, and I take back, and that weakens this diagonal for future checks with the bishop or the queen once our c-pawn moves out of the way, White's c-pawn. And I think next most common thing that I face is knight to c3, and I recently have begun to see knight to d2, guarding this pawn. And as black, I know the most common responses to all four of those. But what Peter played was the fantasy variation. And if you saw the evaluation drop just a little bit there, that's because Stockfish believes the fantasy variation to be one of the weakest ways that White can respond to the Caro-Kann. However, if you look at databases, player databases, not masters, but player databases, the fantasy variation has a pretty high win rate. And I think that's because I see it so rarely. That's my guess as a 1200, 1300 now rated player. We just don't see this. And as I said, normally if White doesn't take or advance this pawn, like if they play knight to c3 or knight to d2 here, I'm supposed to take this. I know that response. But here I don't know the response because I've only seen this 2 or 3 times in a couple hundred games. Maybe 5 times at tops. And so I don't know, as the player on the black side, what to do here. And that's what happened with Peter's opponent, is he didn't know what to do. He was pretty sure he shouldn't take here. Apparently he didn't. Because then you take back, and then White still got 2 center pawns. It does open up this diagonal, this diagonal, and this diagonal to some extent. But White has 2 center pawns, and Black's missing one and hasn't developed the other one. So what the opponent did here was played e5, which is at least an inaccuracy, I'm pretty sure. And I think that's all because they weren't familiar with the fantasy variation. Regardless, here Peter did the right thing, which is to take that way. I don't know why one is better than the other. If you look at Stockfish's recommendation, this one is better than this one. I think maybe the reason that taking e takes d5 is bad might be because that still leaves Black with 2 center pawns. Whereas taking this way, you've both lost 1 center pawn. And and also this pawn's undefended right now. So Peter took back that way, and the opponent took back that way, which was a mistake. Because here, neither player has anything defending the queen except the king. So whoever's turn it is when the d-pawns disappear gets to play the queen sacrifice, forcing the other king to recapture, which ruins castling rights. And Peter saw that. Now, if one player had already had a knight here and that happens, you can take back with the knight, which still might not be great. It's like undeveloping the knight, but your king can still castle as soon as it gets a chance. But here the king has to take back. There's no other choice. So now Black can never castle, and already Peter has an advantage that he's probably not going to lose for the rest of the game. Now here he takes back on the e-file. I think that's inaccurate. It certainly wasn't the best move if you look at Stockfish's recommendations. Personally, here I would leave this pawn alone. And this is my thinking. If they take, I get the development of my knight to the square where I wanted it to be anyway. If they push it, well, I'm guarding that square with my bishop, and I want to develop that anyway. In fact, right here, I might develop the bishop. That's what Stockfish is recommending right up here. I might be about to develop this bishop to a good square anyway, preparing to castle on the king side, and that guards backwards the square that pawn could advance to. And again, we said, if it takes here, we can take back with the knight. We want the knight there anyway, probably, depending on how everything else goes. So I think we can ignore this pawn for now. Right now, one of your advantages is development. You still have the ability to castle. Your opponent's king is misplaced. They don't have any pieces out. So I think that's why b4 is recommended as one of the best moves. Not only does it protect your unprotected e-pawn, but it prepares pretty quickly to castle on the king side, and it still guards the advancement square for that pawn. But it didn't put Peter in a losing position to take the pawn. And because the queen's off the board, we're not too worried about these squares over here being weak right now. Black still has a lot of development to do. The only thing that could check from over there is this bishop, and it's got a couple of moves to get there, and we can easily block it with that pawn. So the opponent plays fairly well here, deciding to get a piece out, and then we now that pawn is gone, Peter plays knight to f3. And that has the added bonus, I guess, of guarding that pawn. This could end up being a weakness at some point in the game. But perhaps the lead in space, Peter's controlling these squares. The knight is hitting these squares. I think that makes up for the fact that you have double pawns in the middle. And Peter can still castle if he needs to. So the opponent doesn't respond in the best way, playing g6, because g6 is usually intended to fianchetto the bishop. But if you fianchetto the bishop right now, where's it going? I think probably should have maybe got it out to one of these places. I don't know exactly, but I know this doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're going to move any of those pawns, why not move this one to get some tempo on your development? And if white doesn't take when you move the f-pawn, then you could always take them, I guess. Or go past it and work on the next one. I don't know. But regardless, Stockfish is saying that the opponent should have played this knight out or put this bishop out here, guarding one of the castling squares. But that pawn surely didn't help. I'm surprised that knight b to d2 is the next best move suggested by Stockfish. Okay, it's dropped now. Well, coming back up. Yeah, bishop to f4 makes a lot more sense to me. Guarding this pawn, and again, preparing to castle queenside. However, Peter was preparing to castle kingside, which is fine. This guards this rear pawn. The front pawn's already guarded. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It makes sense to me. Opponent plays bishop to c5 now, which he should have played on the last turn, probably. But it's still not bad. It's cutting off Peter from castling. Rather than coming here like the computer suggested, which, again, I'm not sure entirely why you would want to block in your bishop. Why? What is... Yeah, I'm not understanding that suggestion by Stockfish. Maybe Stockfish is saying there's no point in castling in this situation. Putting that knight there protects, these two knights would protect each other. And then a little bit down the road, it just wants him to play rook h to f1. I guess because you really couldn't castle right now anyway, it's saying to first get this knight here and then bring this rook over and just build up a really strong fortress, I guess, around your king. But he got the knight out to c3, which is a normal developing move, and I don't see any problem with that personally, especially because now you can, once you move this bishop, you're going to be able to castle to either side. Maybe here would be slightly better. And now the computer wants this king to move, probably so we can get these knights out and connect the rooks. But the opponent got one of the knights out, which isn't bad. Goes, okay. That was fine, going after the bishop. I think maybe when Stockfish suggested going here first, you still could have got to the bishop this way. I don't know. But either way, going after the bishop, because he wants to castle here. This, I think, is pretty obvious. And that bishop doesn't have very many squares that it can go to. If it goes back, the knight can still get it. If it goes here, the pawn can get it. The knight, the bishop, the king, the rook. I guess it could go there, but then you would just block it with the pawn, and then it would have to go back into the corner. So the opponent chose to block it to protect it with b6. That's not good because you can still take it and double their pawns, which is what Peter does. So not bad. Okay. Apologize, I just got a text message from the school, but we'll be fine. Now here, I was trying to figure out what I would have done next, and I think what Peter does makes sense, because the whole reason he put his knight there was to trade it off for that bishop, which has not only doubles the opponent's pawns here and isolates them from the other pawns with these two huge gaps here, but it removed the bishop that was preventing him from castling. So it's his plan for the last several moves has been fairly obvious. He got this bishop out. He got this knight out with the sole purpose of attacking that bishop so he could castle. So he castled here. But the computer counted that as an inaccuracy. Took off, 2 whole points of his advantage? And I'm trying to figure out why. And the reason I'm going to stop here is because, according to the game review, Peter didn't have any mistakes or blunders in this game. Just moves that may not have been the best, or this one, which was inaccurate. Now it says the best move here is knight to g5. And I'm trying to figure out why. I mean, I know it attacks this bishop, and if the bishop moves, it attacks that pawn. And if he went there and the opponent was looking at the computer, they would play knight to d7, which I'm not sure about. Oh, knight to d7 attacks this pawn, which the knight move would have undefended. So then he would have castled, giving up that pawn? What? You see that, right? The line, the top line suggested right up here. So this says knight to g5. And then here, if the opponent played the best move according to Stockfish, which attacks the pawn that he's just undefended by his knight move. Okay, see, now it's saying he would take the bishop. The line that it showed, if you backed up a couple of moves, it says that here he would castle. Oh no, it's moved that over. Now castling's his best move. So you undefended your front e-pawn. They didn't make any move to protect the bishop besides the pawn that's already protecting it. And now you should castle. And if you castled, why wouldn't they take this now? Well, they might, but you still have an advantage. It's one of their top moves. What if they took that now? Now what do you do? Now do you take the bishop? No. You see that, right? Now it just says move this back. Just move this back. I'm learning something right now because I have no idea. Now, of course, now that the bishop's out of the way, you're threatening. Also, the bishop is protecting the knight's return square. I think that may be one reason. But now you're threatening to check here, so that, it's saying to maybe move here. But it's also now it's saying to move this. I don't understand that. And I'm rated now finally 1300. I don't understand that. So I wouldn't expect 900s to understand that knight to g5 is the best move here, even if Stockfish does. Maybe you have to get a few hundred points higher than me to see that. Barring that, it says bishop to h6. Now that I definitely do understand. I might have played that in this position. I might have also put it here on g5, because you still want to develop your pieces, because you're even after you castle, your rooks won't be connected because this bishop is still here. It hasn't moved yet, and therefore this rook really doesn't have anywhere to go. So I think one of my candidate moves might be those. But obviously Peter's plan this whole time was to castle. So he did, and it lost a little bit of what Stockfish said his advantage was, but he still has an advantage. And again, I think that advantage has a lot to do with the space that he's controlling, that all his pieces are protected. Some pieces are protected multiple times. It's not a bad position to have if you're white. This position as black looks bad to me. If I had opened with the Caro-Kann and got this position, I might be ready to resign at this point. Like, what can I do? h6, Stockfish says. I mean, I might play knight to d7 here just to help get that rook out, because these pieces haven't moved yet. But yeah, this isolated pawn thing over at the side, I mean, at least one of them's protected right now, but I mean, the front one's not. So anyway, he definitely has a better position. Now, the opponent played c4, which I kind of get the logic of, that it's threatening this bishop, but remember, Stockfish wanted this bishop to come back here anyway. And so that's what Peter played. Those kind of moves, it's hard to know at the time why they're that bad. And of course, at that point, black was just floundering, trying to find the best move, anything to move that made sense. And that made sense. It attacks a piece. But later, if that player looked at the evaluation, they would have seen that, oh, wow, Stockfish wanted this bishop here a move or two ago. Remember, after we played knight there, that's what it was suggesting, was to bring this bishop back. And so you basically just force the opponent to do their better move. Anyway, okay, well, now they play knight to d7, which was one of their better moves last time, but now it's not. That's very interesting to me. Again, Stockfish is saying knight to g5. That's really important to the fish. I still don't see it, and of course Peter didn't either. But I do see this. What he did play was knight to d4, and that's the second best move suggested by Stockfish. My problem with that would be that it would undefend this pawn, which is currently under threat by that knight. And Peter's up one pawn right now, so that would be a risk. However, I mean, this does attack that bishop, which has basically locked itself in jail. And so you attack the bishop. Now, even if they take this pawn, which I don't think they would, but let's see what it would happen if they did. Then you would take the bishop with check, or play bishop to g5. No, I would have taken here at that point. They would have probably taken back with the pawn, and look at this ugly structure. Like that's not good at all. And of course, now you have this, now you have this. You would have had lots of stuff at that time. So I definitely understand d4. That bishop can't go anywhere. Its own pawn blocks it here, which it just played on a previous turn. Can't go there because of my pawn, can't go there because of my bishop, and so on. So what does black play? Black plays c5, going after the rear pawn, which is undefended, I guess. Peter takes the bishop. Oh, I know what else that did. That protected the bishop from a head. Okay, that wasn't that bad then on black's part. I wouldn't have even seen that. Protecting the bishop with the knight move. Okay, I get that. And now, of course, I still think I would have developed my bishop here. I'm going to want both my rooks in on this attack. But Stockfish says no. It says go ahead and take this now. I mean, that's an option too. But yeah, I think I would have developed this bishop here with the intent to bring out the other rook. But Peter played Stockfish's best move here. Very nice. And black, I guess, didn't know what to do because they just put the knight back on c5. Maybe guarding this. But I think you can let that pawn go. You already have an e-pawn. So he takes this pawn, which inadvertently protects the rook, or maybe intentionally. I'm still worried about this bishop not having gotten out. Okay, black accomplished their quest of getting that pawn. And I think from here on out, Peter's game was pretty straightforward, because right there black blunders. I know black's going after the rook, but this bishop, which Stockfish has been saying to get out for some time, wanted to go there anyway, and now you gave it a really good reason to. So that move just forces Peter to develop the last piece that he needs to develop. And now, I mean, this knight is pinned. Things are about to get bad. So the opponent defends the knight, move forward. A lot of these moves kind of play themselves at this point. The king tries to run, but you give up another pawn. Was that a mistake? Oh no, it's a check. I was like, wait, the rook's hanging, but it's a check. Very nice. Then when the king moves, I don't know that I would have seen that. That's actually not that bad. That keeps the king from coming back, keeps the rook from hitting your rook. I don't think I would have seen that. Good job. Okay. I think here I would have just taken the rook because you're up 5 points of material at this point. I think just take the rook, and they'll take back, and then you don't have to have this here anymore. You can just pull it back. And yeah, Stockfish agrees with me. Just take the rook here. But he picked up another pawn and protected his rook at the same time. So that makes perfect sense. I just know that in videos from grandmasters that I've watched, or international masters, whatever, that called things like when to trade pieces or how to know when it's the right time to trade pieces. One of the times that almost all of them agree on is when you're up on material, especially a full piece or more. At that point, if you can make even trades, most of the time it's a good idea. If everything else is equal, like you're not blundering mate or something. That's why I think, because I've kind of taken that to heart. So when my opponent played that thinking it was guarded, that didn't make sense to me. What did make sense to me is I'm up a full piece and a couple of pawns, is just take it. And yes, they'll take back and my bishop will be undefended, but it's really easy to defend my bishop at this point. I can pull it all the way back here. I can pull it back here. There's several places I can put the bishop to make it safe. For that matter, once their knight is here, you could just put the bishop there and directly threaten their knight immediately. It would have to go back, maybe. It's probably a good idea to keep it on this diagonal, though, to keep the king back there. But yeah, I think I've just got in the habit of checking. When their trade is offered, I look at the material count and say, yep, I'm up a piece. In this case, one minor piece and 2 pawns. Just take it. But again, that's not bad. It gets an extra pawn off the board. And they took the bishop instead of the rook. Is that what they're supposed to do? I'm pretty sure that's their best move. But that's their second best move, and the computer says it doesn't make that much difference. So because you're lost at this point. So now, now he takes the rook since the opponent didn't capture him. That makes sense as well. Trade off the rooks. But because he lost that bishop over there, which he wouldn't have lost if he had taken this rook, now he's only up 3 pawns. And that was the difference between this, whatever the point advantage was. Right here. Because now it's plus 11. You see that. If you take this, you're up plus 11. But because you did it the other way, yeah, you got the extra pawn, but you lost the bishop. So that's why I think that's the difference between this. It's losing that extra piece. Now you're not up an extra piece anymore. You're just up 3 pawns. But anyway, with that kind of advantage, it's fairly difficult to lose. You have to do something pretty bad. And Peter just handled it correctly here. He knew that this square was protected. The rook has to go down there to protect the promotion square. Now you can come in this way. There are various ways to handle this, and the opponent resigned. So this video, like many of mine, went on longer than I had intended it to, but I found several interesting points in this game. Wanted to say one more time, congratulations to Peter Sunday for cracking 900. Every 100 that you crack, even though it's just one number higher than 899, just like 904 is one number higher than 903, for whatever reason in our minds, the hundreds make a big difference, mentally and emotionally. I know I felt that when I cracked 1100, and I know that I felt that when I cracked 1200, and just a day or two ago cracked 1300. Those are nice milestones that we can keep track of. So good luck on your quest to hit 1200 by the end of the year. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.